Today, we're tearing down a piece of conventional wisdom that, let's be honest, almost all of us rely on when the pressure is on. You know the feeling, right? You're trying so hard not to mess up that you do the exact thing you are terrified of. Now, you might think that naming the specific mistake you want to avoid is a highly sensible, logical way to stay sharp when the stakes are high. But we're going to look at some fascinating science today that shows why telling yourself, don't miss, might actually be the exact trigger that guarantees failure. Picture this for a second. You're standing over the most important attempt of your day. Maybe it's a huge presentation at work, maybe it's a crucial putt on the 18th hole, or a massive penalty kick. You tell yourself very clearly, completely consciously, not to make one specific mistake. And then, bam, you make that exact mistake, almost like you aimed perfectly for it. It's not a random error, it's not just some clumsy new mistake, it is literally the precise error you had just named in your head. So, what do we usually do when this happens? Well, we double down. If naming the mistake once didn't work, we basically just yell it at ourselves even harder. Do not go long. Do not pull it left. Do not rush this. But here is the real kicker. Phrasing an instruction as a prohibition still requires your brain to load that forbidden thing right into your working memory just to forbid it. I mean, think about it logically. You literally cannot check whether you're avoiding a hazard without keeping an active representation of that exact hazard in your mind. Now, under calm, everyday conditions, you have the mental bandwidth to afford that overhead. But under intense pressure, when your attention is totally maxed out, you simply can't. Which brings us to a kind of mind-blowing question. What if your brain is actually running a background process, almost like a computer program, whose entire singular job is to keep the very thing you're trying to avoid permanently in view? Okay, let's dive into this. The answer comes from a concept called ironic process theory. This was introduced by psychologist Daniel Wegner in the Psychological Review back in 1994. Wegner argued something completely revolutionary about how our minds work under strain. He proposed that any act of mental control doesn't just run on one track. It actually runs on two distinct, simultaneous systems at exactly the same time. So the first system is your operating process. This is your conscious mind. It's effortful, it requires energy, and its job is to actively search for content and movements that are consistent with what you want to happen, your success. But running right alongside it is the monitoring process. Now, this process is automatic, it is cognitively cheap to run, and its sole purpose is to endlessly scan for signs of failure. It's constantly looking for evidence that the unwanted thing is creeping in. And boom, here is where the trap snaps shut. Because the monitor is cheap, it runs entirely on its own. But the operator, that's expensive, and it needs a lot of cognitive resources. When you take those resources away, say by adding extreme stress, physical fatigue, a ticking clock, or screaming crowd, that expensive operator falters. It basically drops out. But the cheap monitor, it just keeps sweeping. And suddenly, the only process still running at full mental strength is the one holding the unwanted outcome front and center in your mind. Let's trace how we know this actually happens in the real world. Back in 1994, Wegner's theory was mostly about pure thought. But by 1998, he and his colleagues took this out of the realm of pure thought and into physical movement, testing it with golf putting and a handheld pendulum. They proved people made the specific error they were avoiding way more often under mental load. Fast forward to 2015, researchers moved into sports, showing that anxious hockey players and dart throwers who were told not to miss in a specific direction made significantly more errors in that exact direction. And then we get to the absolute crucible, 2019, high-pressure air pistol shooting. This theory was truly put to the test in 2019 by researcher Recep Gorgulu. He focused on 57 highly experienced air pistol shooters. And look, we're not talking about novices here. These individuals averaged nearly 10 years of competitive experience. That is absolutely crucial because it tests the theory on people whose muscle memory is already deeply, deeply ingrained. So here's how Gorgulu set up the experiment. Every single one of these experienced shooters was told to aim for the innermost ring of the target. But crucially, they were also explicitly instructed to avoid the top right quarter of the target. Then, the researchers turned up the heat. They raised the anxiety levels by introducing a significant cash prize for performance. And they didn't just guess that the shooters were stressed. They confirmed it using objective heart rate measures. They made absolutely sure that expensive operating process we just talked about was properly taxed by pressure. The results were honestly wild. Under pressure, the shooters hit the target zone significantly less often, which you might expect. But more importantly, they put significantly more shots into the exact quarter they had been told to avoid. Meanwhile, their errors in literally every other direction didn't change at all. And this brilliantly illustrates the phenomenon. Errors in that forbidden top right quarter spiked incredibly high, while errors in all other directions remained low and flat. That directional specificity is the absolute signature of an ironic error. The pressure didn't just make these expert shooters scatter their shots randomly. No, the pressure actively drove them toward the one place they were guarding against. Section 2. The honest caveat. Conflicting data in sports psychology. Now, to maintain scientific objectivity, we've got to look at the full picture here, because not every single study finds this exact drifting effect. While Gergely saw experienced shooters drift into the forbidden zone in 2019, a 2024 study by Hiroki Nakamoto and his colleagues showed the exact opposite effect among athletes under pressure: overcompensation. These performers violently overcorrected away from the forbidden zone rather than drifting into it. And to add yet another layer, a recent volleyball serving study with 43 young players under an anxiety manipulation found neither pattern. Their scores simply didn't shift at all. So it's not absolutely guaranteed to appear in every task or at every skill level. But here is the crucial takeaway from all of this. Whether you succumb to an ironic error and drift lazily into the forbidden zone, or you panic and violently overcompensate away from it, both of these failure modes actually come from the exact same root source. In both cases, you made the forbidden zone your primary reference point. You essentially handed the steering wheel over to the hazard.
Section 3. The solution, your 3-step action plan.
So how do we actually rewire our brains to handle high-pressure moments? We know the psychological trap. We know the danger of making the forbidden zone your reference point. Well, here's your zero-cost action plan. Step 1, audit your language. For just 1 week, write down the exact sentence you say to yourself before a key attempt. You are probably going to be shocked by how many begin with "do not." Step 2, rewrite every single prohibition as a clear direction. Instead of saying "do not go long," you must formulate a positive approach instruction, something like "land it soft on the front edge." Every instruction has to name a place you actually want the object to go. And finally, step 3, give your attention a specific physical target to land on. End your internal instruction exactly there. It really all boils down to this brilliant summary. An avoidance cue leaves your attention homeless so it settles on the hazard. Think about it. If you tell your brain what not to do, you haven't given it a home. And under stress, when your expensive operating process shuts down, that cheap monitoring process is going to take your homeless attention and drag it right over to the hazard you are so terrified of. Hey, if this explainer reframed how you understand pressure, attention, and performance, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're dedicated to bringing you more science-backed, data-driven tools to help you operate at your absolute best when the stakes are highest. I want to leave you with a direct challenge today. Think about your own life, your own high-stakes moments. What is the specific "do not" sentence you constantly catch yourself saying? And, using the science we unpacked today, what positive, target-focused instruction are you going to replace it with? Let me know down in the comments. Take control of that internal operating system, give your attention a home, and I'll see you next time.